Indonesia is located in a very strategic region. It is flanked by two continents, namely Asia and Australia. In addition, Indonesia is also bordered by two major oceans, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and has four straits that serve as international shipping and trade routes: the Malacca Strait, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait, and the Makassar Strait. 90% of global trade is transported via sea, and 40% passes through Indonesian waters. The Malacca Strait is the busiest trade route in the world, traversed by 50,000 container ships annually, and 50% of the world's shipping fleet passes through this strait. This condition, Indonesia's territory being rich in natural resources and strategically located geopolitically, is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, entrusted to the Indonesian nation. The Indonesian people are well aware that with such conditions, their territory will always be a battleground for countries seeking to control geopolitical positions and extraordinary mineral resources. The fundamental capital possessed by a country to prosper and bring welfare to its people has been owned by the Indonesian nation. The comparative advantage that Indonesia possesses, thanks to its natural abundance and strategic location, is also a test for the nation. The existence of thousands of inhabited islands with diverse ethnicities, languages, cultures, and religions is a true test of the unity of the Indonesian nation, which has been building itself within the framework of the unitary state of the Republic of Indonesia over the past 70 years. And only Pancasila is capable of uniting this nation to continue developing its nationhood and statehood within the Republic of Indonesia. However, history also records that before this nation became independent, many kingdoms in the archipelago were able to endure, even for hundreds of years. Pancasila, aside from being the foundation of the state and the unifying tool of the Indonesian nation, is also the ideology and philosophy of life of the Indonesian people. Therefore, Pancasila has been established as the source of all sources of law in Indonesia. It is undeniable that Pancasila also serves as a compass or the guiding star for state officials in administering the life of the nation and state in this republic. The five principles, known internationally as an explanation of Pancasila, have been understood as universal values. Therefore, let us look at the report from the conversation, which demonstrates one of these universal values, namely social justice, and can serve as a lesson learned for the Indonesian nation. Young Americans today are increasingly dissatisfied with how their leaders work. Their anger was visible when thousands of young people and others held demonstrations on February 24, 2018, demanding gun control nearly a month after several of their friends were shot and killed at a high school in Parkland, Florida, USA. There is growing evidence that today's youth, aged 18 to 29, have strong dissatisfaction with the fundamental aspects of the U.S. economic and political system. More and more of them are rejecting capitalism. A sociologist and economist wondered how young people would redesign their economic system if given the chance. Based on recent surveys, their answers should make status quo supporting politicians reconsider their economic policies. Initially, the survey aimed to better understand how young people feel about the current economic system. Although it may be true that young people of any generation tend to offer less support for the prevailing economic and political system, and conditions may change as they age, the latest survey on this topic shows a new phenomenon felt by today's young Americans. A 2010 survey showed that only 38% of young people had a negative view of capitalism, and this result appeared right after the worst financial and economic crisis since the Great Depression, which hit young people quite hard. So, how does the U.S. government understand all this? Does it mean they prefer a socialist system where the government actively regulates and intervenes in economic activities and limits individual choices? So far, this remains unclear. Research from Harvard shows that only 33% said they preferred socialism. A separate 2015 survey by the conservative group Fresh Unhyuk found that young people aged 18 to 24 were more supportive of socialism than capitalism. Their views contrasted with those of the older generation, who consistently said they preferred capitalism in surveys, with a fairly large margin, and whose numbers increased as they aged. However, the number questioning the principles of capitalism remains the highest, at least in 80%. Surveys on this topic are conducted with awareness that questions may differ between locations and sample sizes are not always large enough to draw broad conclusions. But the results remain the same. Young people are part of the front line of the American public who are beginning to lose faith. So, what do they want? If young people increasingly reject capitalism, yet are unsure about socialism, what do they actually want? To answer this, the survey team needed to explore what was unsatisfying about capitalism. A discussion following the Harvard study concluded that many of these young people feel that capitalism is unfair and excludes many, even though they have worked hard. A 2012 survey by the Pew Research Center found that 71% of those aged 18 to 30 felt there was strong conflict between the poor and the rich. Most young people said they believed some people gained things because they had something, whether they knew someone or were born into wealth. This view of inequality is embedded in the U.S. economic system. Why are young people losing faith in capitalism? It is because the system has lost its ability to be fair. However, they do not seem to believe that an alternative system like socialism could solve the problem. The survey found that 75% of respondents aged 18 to 29 supported this, more than any other age group. Meanwhile, 83% said the concept of employee-owned companies is a very American idea, just like apple pie, hot dogs, and baseball.